So what we're seeing already are robots, that can do tremendous, stunts and jump on boxes and be very agile. So we're pushing the hardware more and more and more. And this we'll see throughout.
In this episode, I'm talking with Péter Fankhauser, ETH alumni, CEO and co-founder of ANYbotics, about taking robotics research from ETH Zurich into the real world, about how it is to scale a spinoff and scale it into a global company, and about shaping the future of autonomous robots. I'm Susan Kish. This is the We Are ETH podcast. So, Péter, how on earth did you land on robots? What was it that sort of compelled you to start studying them? And when did you start studying them?
Well, I went to ETH for mechanical engineering in 2007, actually, not with the intent to do robotics. I was always fascinated by robots, by mechanical things. I built them as a kid from Lego to doing other things. But the moment...
Those Lego ones are super cool.
Yes. And I think they just bring a certain fascination in life with you. But then I was always very careful to look left and right to explore what options are there. And what really fascinated me, the reason why I went into robotics, was the so-called focus project at ETH. These are projects where...
What was that?
A professor gives you an opportunity to come up with your own idea, what to build. You have to find your own team, a motivated team. You have to find your own sponsors for it. And then you essentially have 2 semesters, a lot of time for it, to build it from a concept, from an idea to prototype. And I saw those projects before, and it's very fascinating, right? To go from something and create something. And so the creation of robotics, this is what drew me in.
And is this program just for robots, or is this for a wide range of things, these focus programs?
These focus projects, it was specifically, I'm not sure if it changed these days, but back in the days, it was specifically in robotics, because it was so, you could build a robot out of, a few components, electronics, programming, and you could get started quite quickly.
What kind of robot did you build?
I was always fascinated by the inverted pendulum. It's just the control theory behind it, because it's it's like holding a pen on your hand, and you can do that in simulation and then build a robot. And what I want to build is a robot that can do that in the full 3 dimensions. So we built the robot on a ball, and it has 3 wheels on top, and it's balancing on a ball. It's quite hard for a human to do, right? And so building a machine that could do that was kind of like, the challenge. How would that look and feel like? And so we started with that idea, and we got it working really, really nice. And that was a proud moment. We got then invited to events to present the robot. Several people, did additional projects on it. These days, ETH has the same robot still with an arm on top of it, continuing. So that was a really nice start into robotics.
Robots are fascinating because it feels like in the last few years, the study of the mechanical aspect of them, the study of the ability to see, vision, and the study about calculation has all started to converge into, they start to call it machine intelligence in a different way. It feels like robots is the study of robots and the development of it is at a tipping point. Do you think the best of robots is behind us or ahead of us?
Very, very clearly. And we actually had that tipping point in 2019 for us. What, a lot of people talk about AI, machine learning, reinforcement learning, all of these topics. And, to open that chapter quickly, it's fascinating. We were a very small group already, building the company, and we had to show a reliable system. And doing it once in a lab is easy, but doing it, for hundreds of missions to build the software was quite challenging. And so in the traditional approach, it takes a lot of time, and you end up, with the limiting factor of the human's creativity, essentially. And so what we saw then from ETH that pioneered reinforcement learning for Lego robots is that the system would behave in those moments quite gracefully. Even, sometimes we had a case where a lower leg would break off, and the robot would just, walk on in a weird way, but
limp
exactly. And that's just a fascinating moment. It was never programmed to do that. And that was the moment when we said, okay, let's stop the old way. This takes too long, too many people. We have to take a bet and go fully on AI for robotics. Within 6 months, we had robots walking. And since 2020, all our robots come with a base software for locomotion, completely based on neural networks.
Where did the name ANYbotics come? Or is it ANYbotics or ANYmall? Or I'm sure there is a story there.
In the beginning, you're not sure what exactly going to build. And so we're looking for a company name, but also product names that were also connected somehow. So the company is called ANYbotics, right? And the robot, the four-legged robot, Animal, it's a play, obviously, to the real animals with the four legs. We had two other products. ANYdrive was actually motors, special motors that we built for the robot, but that we also, in the beginning, sold separately. We stopped doing that. And also, we had a software called ANYbalance, right? So it allowed us to play with one name, but still figuring out what exactly we're going after.
Did any of you have a clue about how to build a company?
To a certain extent, yes, I would say the senior person, obviously, Hans-Péter Fankhauser, who came back, he's seen corporate, never had a startup himself. So, but obviously there was a good combination of different experiences. But yes, no, so also no, in the sense that none of us had a robotic scale-up, which is its own journey.
You were incubated within ETH and the WEAS program. How did you approach your different funding rounds? You said you got external funding starting in 2020, and you've raised, whatever, a couple $100 million at this point, I think.
Essentially, the first step in 2020 was to work with Swiss and European investors. The first round was led by Swisscom Ventures, an amazing VC out of Switzerland. And that in the subsequent rounds, that opened the door for international investors. So the Series B in 2023, 50 million was then led by Silicon Valley and European investors. The recent round was also global companies such as Qualcomm and TDK. And so essentially you grow from stage to stage, and each stage is, a validation of what you're doing, and you have then access to bigger pockets of money.
Did you, in the beginning, imagine you would end up as the CEO of the team?
No, and that was also not like a goal of mine. We went into it very naive, right? All of us just wanted to do a great job and see this work and build a company.
And build cool things. Exactly.
However, in the beginning, I think one important decision for me was the understanding that if we just continue what we had done at ETH, we would be a research company, and nobody's going to pay for that. So the day we found, I switched over to the company, I stopped essentially programming, all of the stuff I love doing, but we needed somebody who would take the energy and time to think of the customer, the market, sales, field engineering. There's so many topics that nobody else did. And I did that for the first couple of years. And I think that gave me an interesting profile to understand deeply the tech, having co-built it, but then also starting to speak the language of the customers, understanding the problem. And the magic happens in between, right? And so I think ultimately I saw things that others didn't. And at some point we decided we need a CEO, somebody who takes the first step. And it very naturally from all sides, this came together.
Very cool. On your website, I thought you did a really good job of talking through the different industry sectors and saying, what's the problem that has to be solved? And how is it that your product solves that problem? Can you talk through one of those? And I'm going to nudge you to talk about oil and gas, if that's okay.
Ultimately, and this was also the founding story of the company, I'll take you a little bit back. When we published videos still at ETH of our robot, that was back in the days where if you published a robot climbing stairs, you got immediately hundreds of thousands of views. These days, no, that doesn't happen anymore, right? But then what happened is that operators of industrial facilities, and oil and gas was very early, reached out to us and said, hey, are you selling these robots? What are you planning to do with them, right? Can we have a test and do a test with you? And we said, why? And they started to explain, well, we need the data of the facility. We need a mobile unit that can climb stairs. It's often dangerous environments. And so the first question I asked, why don't you put sensors everywhere? IoT is a thing, right? Turns out you cannot place for every problem at every location a sensor. And the more questions we asked, right, the clearer it became, we need a mobile data gathering vehicle, right, to put it abstractly, a robot that can move around high-end sensors to collect data, and then you need the software to understand that data. And this is what we're going after. Today, the industry, they have the problem that they need the data for productivity. They're using people often to gather the data that cannot be collected by fixed installed sensors. It's a very tedious process, very repetitive, error-prone, and the sensing of people, our eyes and ears, are not great to collect the data. So robots who take over those repetitive, remote, and dangerous tasks, that's what we're solving for our customers.
So that means things like vision, vibration, hearing, temperature, the whole range, right?
That's exactly right. So our robot is equipped with cameras to see and read out what it's seeing, gauges, cracks, missing components, right? To observe the equipment and asset. Thermography, thermal cameras, very important to find overheating equipment,
Thermography.
right? That's always a sign something is going wrong. Vibration, brilliant. This is where very early on a machine, some people potentially can feel it or hear it if something goes wrong. But if you do it even with a sensor in the ultrasonic range, you can hear much, much earlier. So by using this technology, we can actually go beyond what people can do. We call it, superhuman inspection capabilities.
To what extent are you looking at drones as a complement to your four-legged? I mean, they're both unmanned, right?
Yes. Drones are very much a complement. With a drone, you can fly to a perspective where it's difficult for a human to reach. The limitation, though, with the drone is, flight time, payload, regulations. People don't like, drones above their head, and very important, autonomy. Our robots are always installed to be fully autonomous. So they run inspection rounds multiple times a day for hours, just very frequently collecting data.
You talk about different applications in different sectors. The one sector I didn't read about was defense, military applications. Can you talk about that? Is that I'm shocked if there hasn't come up.
Of course, it comes up, and the world is, it's a fast-changing world. For us at the foundation of the company, and also with some of our investors and also customers, it was very important to be very strict to say we're not doing military weaponized applications or in conflict situations. It's just, ethical and moral. It's just the way we went, our decision. Ultimately, it's also the tech that you're building. Today, a robot would probably not be, in the application, a good device to do that. It's optimized in a different direction. Also, branding-wise, you don't want to have a robot. You see it in the news in a conflict situation, and next day you're, seeing it one next to you. It's just not a good feeling. So for us, it's very clear as we build ANYbotics, this company builds robots to take over work in industrial environments.
Is ETH in Switzerland, is it a hub for areas around robotics?
Yes. Meanwhile, there's an amazing amount of great young, but great, very creative robotics companies where people have seen, hey, look, I can find a problem, I can build a solution for it, I can build hardware, software, AI coming together and just change fundamentally how work is being accomplished. So over the years, we see so many companies, and it's fascinating. And so many people, say now Zurich becomes the Silicon Valley of robotics. That's big, thanks to ETH Zurich, also the companies that are moving here, EPFL in Lausanne as well. So very clearly, it's a hub growing and still having its best time ahead of it.
Do you, in terms of the way that ETH, you've mentioned they sort of gave you an incubator, a nursery with which the company could sort of develop it. How about things like, helping you understand about financial statements, marketing, product market fit, leadership, culture development, all those other less scientific but more pragmatic aspects of building up a company?
That was not in the focus. What I learned, everything with marketing, sales, and financials, no, that was clearly not the focus. That's also okay. That's something as an engineer you can pick up quite quickly. I think the leadership aspect, that's one element that during a PhD you start, to learn a bit, because you suddenly have to supervise bachelor and master students, manage performance, give feedback, grade them, etc. So that was certainly a starting point. Was not, at least back in my days, not very systematic, but you had an opportunity to practice. And what I really appreciated is our professor, the lab, Professor Roland Siegwart, and then later Marco Hutter, that gave a lot of trust to people. So it's this enabling leadership that, I find the best people, I give them the vision, and they will figure out, the best way to solve it. So those elements of building a company, certainly we already experienced at ETH.
I'm going to go back to industries and places where ANYbotics can apply. We talked about oil and gas because it's a sector I understand, so I could visualize what you meant by the applications for it. Are there other sectors, or let me phrase it slightly differently. What are the industry sectors that you think have the greatest potential to be impacted by robotics? Because now I just went to a nuclear fusion construction facility outside of Boston, and it was the first one. So they said they only had 2 robots, but they anticipated that when they went to scale, that the factory floor would be primarily robots. And that's certainly what you read when you talk about production in, let's say, some of the huge new production plants.
So robotics is actually, nothing new. It impacted the manufacturing industry massively, right? Cars mass-produced by robots. The entire logistics warehousing. I mean, Amazon has 1 million robots installed, right? And now what's happening is...
A million?
And growing.
Oh my gosh.
And the next industry that's being disrupted now is, the critical infrastructure. So oil and gas, we can talk about specifically, a lot of offshore facilities where you need to fly out people, which is often dangerous, very costly, exposed environments. It's just not an environment you want to have people. So robotics is clearly moving there. Chemical facilities, right? Huge facilities, explosive environments. We work a lot in metals as well, steel, aluminum production, hot, dusty environments, pulp and paper. But it doesn't end there, right? We work a lot with, for example, Siemens Energy in the power industry, utilities. Again, environments that need the highest uptime. You want to expand the asset lifetime. For all of these things, you need data. And with that type of robot we're building, there's no boundaries, right? Essentially where it can go. And so for us, it's rather, there's so many opportunities. Which ones do we focus on? And it's rather, and there's still the specific language to go to market motion, the marketing, that into specific tools. In the nuclear industry, you want to have a radiation sensor, right? And so you still need to equip your robot with the special tools. And that's why we also tend to focus on certain industries.
It sounds like robotics has done a fair amount of disruption over the last, let's say, 10 years in terms of its impact on industries and the areas you've talked about. What do you think will be the most disrupted going forward, either in terms of your customer groups, but also in terms of the industry itself of creating robots?
Robotics is always a mix between, hardware components, electronics, software, and, we had a big impact from mobile phones, from autonomous driving, the availability in cheaper components. What I'm really excited about in the last couple of years, and this has not stopped, is the impact of AI. So what we're seeing already are robots, they can do tremendous, stunts and jump on boxes and be very agile. So we're pushing the hardware more and more and more, and this we'll see throughout. What's interesting then is with this knowledge, you can start building your robot differently. Today, our robots are still high-end products, very precise, the best of the sensors you can get. But once you have AI, it can compensate a lot for the precision, lack of sensors, different materials. And so this is AI then starting eating into the cost of the hardware, right? And this, again, opens up new opportunities. So that whole game between hardware, software, or /AI, I think that's just a wheel that started to spin. And we will see, many more robots, different types of robots, and just move and behave in a smarter way. So the way we were fascinated by ChatGPTs and LLMs and suddenly how that changed our view how to write text, the same will happen with any type of machine that moves. Today only, the big companies, where industrial operators where you can afford an expensive robot because your operation is already expensive.
Right.
But this trend of cheap robots, not only through mass production, but also through AI that can compensate for precision, that combination will, give access to many more people and democratize robots. So, we call it creating a workforce of autonomous robots. So you have human workers and robot workers. But I'm sure in the next couple of years or decades, we'll have robots just normal among us. And that's thanks to, it's the same way we see cars today. It will be just, everybody will have access to these types of machines.
If you were to give yourself advice, let's say you'd done great as an undergraduate, you've got a PhD thesis and you've done a project that just looks like it has such potential and you're thinking about whether or not it could be a company. What advice would you give yourself? 3 things.
I mean, number one, I think this is what we did well and still doing well. Something that, you should always do is spend time with the customer. Stop doing what you're doing now. do everything else. So I think that was important. I've spent multiple weeks offshore. I'm offshore certified to do these things, just expose yourself in these maybe sometimes uncomfortable situations outside of the laboratory. This, is everything. Then, yeah.
So you went to offshore oil
It was
platforms?
offshore wind, but spent also a lot of time in chemical and oil and gas facilities, yeah.
Super cool. Okay, good. Number 2.
Well, the second one is, as a PhD student, as a researcher, right, you get trained certain things in life and a pattern that you have to unlearn. So for me is, we strive a lot from IQ. Just, there's one solution. You can find it. You can research it. Things have been written, right? And so you can do a lot of desk research and all of that. And at the meantime, ETH, or at least for me, wasn't a place where you learned a lot about EQ, right? Communications, the leadership aspects. And this has become extremely, obviously now in my role, important because everybody has a high IQ already in the room. So how do you combine EQ and IQ together to be very deliberate about it, to learn about it, learn from the best? And so this has been an important journey for me.
Okay. And number 3?
Probably, the capacity to ask for help. Not everything needs to be overcomplicated. Sometimes we have the tendency just as engineers to think, and eventually find a solution. But often it's just go out, ask, and the beauty is often in simplicity, and often a external stimulus can help you reach that. And so instead of spending too much time at the desk and in front of the PC, talk to people, collaborate, be out there, and start connecting the dots, because there's so many things out there that in the moment you probably don't see yet.
So cool. That is great. So I'd love to close by asking you a few questions that we ask all of our guests, which sounds like you've heard some of our podcasts. You were all prepared for this one. So the first one would be, when you were a little boy growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up?
An astronaut.
Yeah. An astronaut.
Still want to do that.
And you're not developing space applications.
No, it's the for me was always, and I still, if I have the opportunity, I'll go. It's the adventure of doing something exciting, slightly dangerous, but with the support of technology. And this is, for me, being an astronaut is the pinnacle of that.
Well, fortunately, the ETH, as I understand it, has a great program about space, so you're in the right place. Very cool. What are you learning about? What are you curious about right now?
Right now, I spend a lot of time thinking, how will the company evolve, going from, now 200 people, where I can still lead through proximity. If things need to happen quickly, I can stand in front of the crew. I almost know still, almost everybody's name. That proximity where many people are in Zurich. We have an office in San Francisco, but many, many people are in Zurich. So that works for the moment. But as soon as we're 400, 500 people, this will be multi-layered, complex. So we're essentially preparing ourselves, the leadership team, to already work through those facets of indirect leadership, of even more simplicity, repetition, communications. So that's a field I'm interested in and preparing for the future.
It's really hard. What books are you reading? And it doesn't have to be super professional books. It could just be something that captured your attention.
Yeah, I typically like to read books of entrepreneurs and their stories. Because we, as a company builder, you go through often some beautiful, but most of the time very hard times, and it's draining a lot of the energy. And so reading books like The Hard Things About the Hard Things or Built by Tony Fadell, these kind of stories just take you on that journey from somebody else's eye and makes you appreciate what you got, the fun in the journey. And it feels like a group of like-minded people to learn from others on that journey.
Fantastic. And finally, what's your favorite place for a cup of coffee in Zurich?
Actually, at home. I don't have a special coffee machine, but, at home with my partner in your apartment, and just that calmness, peace and quiet, and then being able to work a bit to do something else. That's my favorite place.
Fantastic. Peter, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan, for having me.
It's been wonderful. In this episode of the We Are ETH podcast, we talked to Péter Fankhauser and about his journey through robotics and growing the company ANYbotics from a spin-out to now a world player in the world of robotics and its future. I'm Susan Kish, host of the We Are ETH podcast. We tell the stories of the alumni and friends of the ETH Zurich, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. ETH regularly ranks amongst the world's top institutions in terms of cutting-edge research, cutting-edge education and science, and the people. The people were there, are there, and will be there. Please subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you listen, and if you enjoyed today's conversation, give us a good rating on Spotify or YouTube or Apple. And finally, I'd like to close by thanking our producers at ETH Alumni and LA Media, and thank you, our listeners, for joining us.